Hello.
Hey,
Hey,
Garland, how's it going?
great, man. Thanks for inviting me back.
Absolutely. And I've appreciated all of our conversations, especially in the recent weeks, because there's so much happening, so much division, so much people at each other's throats. And I always appreciate that you keep kind of your head on your shoulders and you keep a cool about you, which I appreciate. And I need to remind myself sometimes because I tend to get a little worked up. And when I see things, I go, I cannot believe these people are behaving like this. I go, remember what Garland would do. Just take a breath and it's all good. We'll get through it if we just choose our words right, and we'll get through it. So thank you,
Well,
Garland.
I
Is
don't
that
know, man.
yeah.
There's a story so big now that I think it's too much for me to handle. Like a
Oh
handful
really?
of people, yeah, a handful of people got measles.
Oh my
I'm
God.
telling you, I mean, come on. I mean, yeah, is there war, nuclear annihilation on the horizon, genocides going on in the Middle East? Fair enough. But I think like somebody in Texas got measles. Now,
Oh my
when
God.
I was a kid, which was a long time ago, everybody got measles. Every time you turn around, measles. Hey, what do you got? Measles. Hey, what are bumps? Hey, looks like it's measles. Okay. Now, oh my God, measles all across and it's, I think for some reason it's RFK Jr.'s fault. I really don't know why, but it's his fault. Somebody got measles, and therefore we must all panic and just like run around in different directions like it was some kind of a friggin' zombie apocalypse because a handful of kids got measles.
Yeah, it's so incredibly crazy that we have conditioned ourselves and society's conditioned ourselves to be so afraid of sickness, so afraid of a flu or whatever the thing is. Completely different than when we grew up, right? I mean, we grew up, it was like you embrace natural immunity and herd immunity. You embrace these things of all the stuff that we know. You stay out of school for a few days, stay out of work for a few days, and you rest up and you have your vitamin D and C and all this stuff, and you'll be back on your feet in no time. And that's just not the case anymore. It's red alert, danger, danger, like you said, and that's just where we are now. So yeah, we better I think we got to get ready for another lockdown,
Eh,
Garland. It seems
I
like
think
it's coming.
that's probably best bet. And all of our shows, all of the stuff we're talking about, we just put all that stuff on hold and just 24, every show, every day, it's measles.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's let's get into a couple things here. We have I'm sure you've been covering the Ukraine ceasefire deal disaster. Everybody is talking about. There's well, we're calling it a disaster. There's people that are really excited right now. They thought that you got this ceasefire deal in place, and that means that Trump's doing the thing he promised. And the ball's in Russia's court. Let's hear Rubio explain the ceasefire deal, and I'm going to show a couple of the reactions, and I want to get your take on this, Garland. Here's Rubio congratulating himself on job well done with this ceasefire agreement. Here we go.
Made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball's now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Wow. So I guess the ball's in Russia's court there, Garland. Look, all the other people that chimed in on this. Look at that. Ursula came in and said, we welcome the news. The Ukraine talks, including a proposal for ceasefire agreement. This is great. A lot just for long-lasting peace for Ukraine. The ball is now in Russia's court. Interesting. So we're just going to share the language. And Emmanuel Macron also is telling us the ball is now clearly in Russia's court. Wow, this is great. Look at everybody. Oh, and look at that. Kala says, well, the ball is always in Russia's court. Well, let's look at this response. Trump and his team just announced, this is from Danny Hapong, Trump and his team just announced a farcical ceasefire with Ukraine, and all the warmongers are falling into line. The ball is not in Russia's court. The U.S. is the root cause of the conflict. Ukraine was attacking Moscow and killing innocents in Kursk. during these farcical talks, the U.S. hasn't negotiated in good faith. In fact, it has yet to offer one concession despite being defeated by Russia. The U.S.'s warmongering elite can't be trusted ever. And then we got Ukraine and the EU cry ceasefire. The ball's in Russia's court. Putin says nothing, pulls up to Kerch in a full military uniform. I hope they got their answer. Garland Nixon, make some sense of this. Is there anything real going on, or is it like they're saying, the skeptics are saying, this is all ceasefire theater?
You know what? Yesterday, I'm glad to say I predicted exactly what the Russians would do. I knew it. I knew it. So it was designed as a trap, right? Well, the U.S. and the Ukrainians and all, we're going to come up with a plan, I'll put it like this. The neocons saw it as a trap. We'll come up with something that we know Russia won't take. And then we'll say, well, if Russia doesn't take this, then we know they're the bad guys, as if Russia really cares whether or not the neocons think they're the bad guys, right? Like the Russians are going to go, oh, darn, you'll think we're the bad guys. That would really screw us then. No, like the Russians don't give a shit about that, right? But amongst themselves, that was great. Oh, boy, we laid a trap for Russia. They're screwed now. I knew what Russia was going to say. Listen to this. Moscow is in, I've read everything out of Russia. Moscow is in favor of a ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict. And here's what else I'm going to do. You know, I was an investigator, and one of the things I was trained in is statement analysis. Let's do statement analysis. This is Vladimir Putin. Moscow is in favor in the Ukraine of a ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict. But now here's what you need to know about the word "but" in the statement analysis. Ignore everything that was said before the word "but." What that means is everything I just said is bullshit. Forget it, right?
Right.
So Moscow is in favor of a ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict, but which means we're not in favor of a ceasefire. Okay, what next? But questions will need to be ironed out in future talks. What are they saying? We ain't in favor of a ceasefire, and we got some things we need to talk about. Future talks. That's called negotiations, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the U.S., right? So forget the first part, the word "but," and did all that away. So what did Moscow say? Questions will need to be ironed out in future talks with the U.S. With who? Not with the EU, not with the Ukrainians, with the U.S. All they said was what they always said. They said, we don't need to talk with the Ukrainians. They're a bunch of friggin' mooks. We don't need to talk with the EU. They're idiots, and they got no power anyway. Everything's between us and the U.S. Absolutely nothing's changed. But I knew they would artfully do it. The Russians were like this: ceasefire. Ceasefire, you say? That's a wonderful idea. We're all for a ceasefire. I know they looked around, thought these guys would never come around. You want a ceasefire? I want a ceasefire. Oh my gosh. You know what? Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're rocking and rolling. We're in. This is great. However, a few minor things we're going to need to iron out to make that ceasefire happen. Just one or two small things in these future talks. In other words, negotiations. I'm sure we can iron these out. And if you continue to read down, you know what they did? They went over everything they've said in the past. Well, they won't be able to go into NATO. And they just went list by list and list. Well, and we're going to have the size on their military. And of course, and all the Russians did was said, that's a great idea. We can iron all this out with the future talks. And then they went over every single thing they've said. So they said nothing. They basically said no. But we're not going to say no. We're going to pose it as a yes. And then we're going to throw in everything we've said before, right? They were like, yes. And in there, he says, yeah. And you know what? Putin says, I think I can talk to Trump on the phone sometime soon. And we can, bring up work on a few of these things. And we, and you go down to the bottom and the guy, and one of the spokesmen says, it's unclear how amenable the U.S. is to Russian demands about demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine. Under any circumstances, Ukraine must not pose a threat to Russia. This means we must prevent any risk of revanchism, which logically entails that Ukraine should not maintain offensive military capabilities or embrace an aggressive Nazi ideology aimed at Russia. They just said everything they said in the past.
Yeah.
So all the Russians basically said was, great idea. We're all for a ceasefire. We just need to talk and iron out a few little items, basically every damn thing that we've said in the past. And they went on to say, if it doesn't work, I mean, hey, there's things going on that are getting ironed out. They literally said, like, a lot of these things are getting ironed out on the front lines. In other words, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. So very artful. Those who thought that they were laying a trap for Russia, the bear traps laying there, they just walked right around it and kept on walking. But what's interesting is Trump said, one of his response, great, I think talks are going seriously. And he said, this is the opening or something like the beginning of talks. And we're going, so basically, Trump wants out, it's clear. But he don't know how the hell to get out. He's got no plan. He doesn't know how to get out. I think basically the Russians know that. And the Russians are trying to help him. The Russians are like, yeah, sure, I'm all with the ceasefire, and we need to talk. And afterwards, Trump was like, this is great. We can work on these things and we can talk. So while it may have been from the neocon perspective laid as a trap, right? Think about this. It's in your court. We're playing tennis. Boink, it's on your side. What are you going to do? You're going to boink, hit it back to my side. Boink. Now, they said, here's a yes or no to the Russians, and the Russians picked it up and said, great, now we're negotiating. Here's back to you, buddy. Now you put something in and back to me. So I think it was artful. I thought that's what the Russians were going to do. And so now they said, quote, yes, we want a ceasefire, but we need, and they brought up some good points saying, and this was pretty smart. They said, what about all the people that we got surrounded in Kursk? I mean, what would happen with them? Would they just go home? We can't just let them go home. They've invaded our country. Would they surrender? How would they lay down their arms? And they brought up 3 or 4 things that would have to be discussed in the ceasefire that were in there that you'd have to discuss anyway, right? Well, how would we monitor whether or not arms were coming? How would we do this? So they brought up some valid questions about the ceasefire that would have to be discussed. And then they just threw in all the rest of their stuff. So they've turned it into, now we're negotiating. All right, your turn. We need to talk and negotiate. I thought it was artful. I thought it was diplomatic, and I think it worked out well.
Okay.
But you were right. It was a trap. It was an attempted trap by the neocons.
Yeah, and I think that they're very quick to celebrate early on these things without looking at all the subtleties. And like Putin's always behaved in a very subtle and contained and very just methodical.
He's a lawyer.
Yeah,
he's a lawyer. They forget he's a lawyer. A lawyer knows how to answer a damn question without answering it. You know what I mean? You're never going to trap a lawyer with a question.
So can I ask you about the gear, the military gear? So I'm going to put this on the screen so people can see. We haven't seen this look from Putin. So he puts this gear on. Is he sending a message dressing like this now? Is this something or is this nothing, Garland?
The Russians, now this is because I get a lot of contacts in Russia and I review a lot of Russian stuff. In fact, later on today, I'll be doing an interview for Izvestia, one of the Russian media outlets. So the Russians say and see it as he's showing, it was a big deal, the Kursk region, because of, the Battle of Kursk in World War II. And now you got people back in Kursk and the Ukrainians this was about that Kursk incursion. This was about enemy troops on Russian land. And he's going to Kursk to demonstrate his determination. We're kicking him off of. So this was an internal, how the leader of a country is going to do things for external purposes, but he also does things to speak to his own people. So it was kind of a patriotic, it was kind of, darn it, he went to congratulate guys on things that they've done and pin a few medals and do some salutes. So this was internal for Russia. This is the darn determination. We're running these damn Ukrainians off of our land and taking our land back. So yes, it was a message. The message was internally, rather political internally rather than externally.
Well, this seems to line up. I like your take on this. What's the next thing? What's the next move? We're talking about the game of tennis. So he kind of threw it right back. So what are we going to see next from Trump? What's interesting is I think Trump's ready to talk to him on the phone. Yeah, he said, look, I'm all, of course, in other words, no, but yeah, sure. But we need to iron out a few things. And he said, something about,
Let me find it. I'll tell you exact word. Here's what he says. I think we need to discuss this with our American colleagues and partners, Putin. Maybe we could discuss this with President Trump over the telephone. So I suspect that two things. Number one, that you'll be hearing about Trump and Putin having a phone call sometime soon. I also think that based on a number of things that I'm reading, that there's major plots to get rid of Zelensky.
Yeah,
he's out of here. They're talking about that in Kiev. Apparently, that high-ranking officials in Kiev are saying, yeah, his days are numbered around here one way or the other. This guy's, basically, he's in his, apparently they told the Financial Times he's in the, this is the end of the Zelensky thing.
Yeah.
So
we've been seeing kind of the end, the final stretch for Zelensky. We see it in his eyes. He's been just a walking ball of fear. There's only so many ways that can end anyways. I guess from my end, again, being here in Hollywood, we still see the massive disconnect from the left. And we saw that reaction. You remember how they responded to Trump at the speech he gave when Trump was giving the speech, addressing Congress a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about the diplomacy factor, and the Democrats were just sitting on their hands, being complete stubborn a-holes. And the one time they actually got vocal during the Ukraine discussion was when he said, you guys have been funding this proxy war all these years and throwing all this money into this thing, and they're all like, yeah. And then he set them up and said, so you want to keep doing that some more? Is that for another 5 years? And then they all went silent. It was quite a remarkable moment. I'm so disgusted, Garland. I talked earlier about how I tend to, my blood gets boiling when I see so many people still caught on the side of keep sending money, keep the Ukraine war going. What is Trump doing? He's a traitor. The EU is standing up against him. They have everything wrong here. Are they ever going to see what's actually happening, and are they getting in the way of this at all? Because I feel like that it's the worst thing you could be doing right now is pushing this to continue, pushing more money, and it's all what the Democrats are doing, including Bernie, including all of the squad. I mean, we just it's insane, and they just keep doubling down on it. What are your thoughts on that? Are they going to keep doing this, or are they going to back off at some point?
No, they have to keep doing it for this reason, because they're living in the false narrative. Right? In their world, Putin's an evil dictator who woke up on a given Thursday morning and decided to attack Ukraine just because he's evil or something like that. There's no nuance. There's no context. There's no history. There's none of that. The neocons made up a story. And in that story, we never overthrew the government of Ukraine. There was no color revolution back in 2004-5. That didn't happen. The Orange Revolution, where we overthrew the government back then. The 2014, that wasn't a revolution. It was a revolution of dignity. It wasn't. We didn't throw. So with them, they're living in a narrative. In their narrative, they're right. In the real world, they're not. But in their narrative, they're right. Think about this. Who delivered the response for the Democrats to Trump? I think her name was Slotkin, Elizabeth Slotkin, former CIA. And what did she say? She talked about Reagan and how Reagan knew how to stand up to the Ruskies. Reagan. So the Democrats are now the party of Ronald Reagan and the CIA. So, and they're to the right of Reagan, I might add. Because Reagan didn't want, he met with the Russians and talked, hey, dudes, you're not the evil empire. Now, don't get me wrong, he was up to no good everywhere, but he didn't want nuclear war with the Russians. Who signed all of these SALT treaties? Reagan. So they claimed to be the party of Reagan. And then they got some CIA goon giving their response. That's who the party is. If you're the party, they're actually not the party of Reagan. They're the party of George W. Bush.
And Dick Cheney.
Yeah, exactly. They're the party of Dick Cheney and George W. Not even George W. Bush, because they're to the right of George W. Bush on foreign policy. You got the party of Dick Cheney. They are CIA goons. And if you're a CIA goon, I mean, these things make sense. It's knowing it's accepting the party for what they are. Don't try to change, like you say, somebody starts dating somebody and they want to change them. Don't try to change them. They are what they are. Either if you don't like them what they are, you got to find somebody else. But let's not pretend like they're anything else but CIA warmongering goons. And based on that, if somebody says something other than let's go to war, well, they're going to be pissed. They had on their blue yellow color of propaganda ties, and they were just standing there. And when somebody said something that aligned with their cultish propaganda, hey, Ukraine, good guy, yeah, like clapping like friggin' seals. It's sickening to watch them. It's sickening. I can't look at the Democrats anymore because I don't like looking at a cult.
And they've demonstrated way more insane cult behavior than the MAGAs. We're seeing. We were just talking about on the show about how MAGAs, there seems to be a consciousness, a self reflection, an ability to look at things that aren't going the way that they wanted to go, or the thing that they signed up for, and they seem to understand more about how voting works. I mean, in general, like when you talk about aligning with a party, the party that's closest to your beliefs, the one that's going to be, you know what, I'd rather this guy get in than that guy. Okay, so you need to hold them accountable. And so we're seeing the MAGAs demonstrate what it means. You can still be loyal to your color or your team or whatever, but you hold them accountable when they do something wrong. When they try, like we just saw Trump go after Thomas Massie, and his base is holding him accountable, saying you can't do that. This guy he's part of the resistance. He's a guy that doesn't take influence from AIPAC at all. And you can't just pretend that he needs to go. So those are the things that you don't see Democrats ever do. Never challenge Nancy Pelosi. They never challenge Joe Biden or Kamala. Nothing. They just embrace every single thing they do. And I think as a result, the party understands they can get away with a lot more. I think that when you stand up, Trump has some serious considerations to make now. He's got to realize, if I go and try to take out Thomas Massie, I'm going to have some pushback. If I go all in too far over here, I might have some pushback, especially from the MAHA movement. They might have a problem if I back off and I start pushing the vax or start pushing things again, start pushing mRNA technology. So that's a good thing. I think we're seeing on the right, correct?
So let me say a couple of things. Number one, while both of these parties are unhealthy, the Democratic Party is no longer even a political entity. I just say it's more like a cult, right? Mm-hmm. They have a series of things that they believe, and the cult believes all of them, no matter what, right? Notwithstanding any new data or empirical evidence that come in, certain things are, or have to be accepted a priori. Okay. Here's where the Democrats are all wrong about MAGA. They think MAGA was Trump. And the reason I know better is because when I started with Fox News, I was with Fox News, and back then I was a Democrat and I was the guy arguing on behalf of the Democrats, right? And I believed in Democrat stuff, right? But I eventually became like so many people that I know, became a big Bernie supporter. And then 2016, when Bernie got screwed, off I went and I was done with the party. Like a lot of people, that's where was a wake up call for a lot of people I know. Okay. I was at Fox. You know what we covered? The Tea Party. The Tea Party was a result of the 2008 crisis and the bailouts. That was the beginning of Make America Great Again. That was the beginning. Well, actually, here's what it was the beginning of: America First. Right. And it was people first. Why? Because what were they pissed off about the most? The bailouts. The corporations. The Tea Party was really pissed because all these working class people got screwed by the 2008 crisis, and the government came along and handed trillions of dollars, hundreds of billions, trillions to the corporations. That's what the Tea Party was pissed about. The Tea Party came up, they put these Tea Party people in, a lot of them screwed them, wouldn't do what they want, did the usual stuff. They didn't change Washington, Washington changed them. The Tea Party was pissed. Everybody remembers the Tea Party. Along comes Trump. Trump took the helm of the Tea Party. MAGA is the Tea Party. Everybody thinks, Democrats think Trump came in and all of these worshiping MAGA people just walked up and said, we love Trump. But Trump came in, the Tea Party was kind of that, what the term now they're using, populist, right? Working class kind of thing. Trump came in, and the Tea Party looked at Trump, and he used remember, Trump was an entertainer. He understands his audience. He used the rhetoric. He saw the Tea Party. He saw where they were going. He saw what was what, and he used the rhetoric that was attractive to them. And wham, they had a new name. It was no longer the Tea Party. It was MAGA. And Trump steered that, and he took that. I mean, when you hear me say that, it's damn obvious, isn't it? It's so really obvious. There's no argument. Oh, go ahead.
It's so obvious when you say it. And then I think back to when the Tea Party was very active and very vocal. And I was an avid, MSNBC watcher.
Me too.
I was watching Morning Joe every morning. And I feel like, man, they really did a number on us, man, because I remember being told that the Tea Party was against Obama because
he was black.
Because he was black.
And guess what else?
The messaging.
They said the same thing about the Tea Party like they do about MAGA. They're a bunch of idiots, old country boys with hats and camouflage hats on, and they're ignorant, uneducated. They said the same thing about the Tea Party that they say about MAGA, because the Tea Party was MAGA. Trump comes along. He commandeers the Tea Party. The Tea Party's like, finally, we got a guy we can run for president who's talking our language. Then in comes Trump, and they get behind Trump. And really, Trump got battered around with Russiagate for 4 years. He couldn't do much, but it pissed the Tea Party off because they felt like they're coming after us. And he really couldn't do much, for good or bad, apparently. But my point is, so then they keep Trump, he's out for 4 years. Trump comes back in. He's a Tea Party guy. They just changed the name. But remember something. They were there before Trump. So if in fact they were just the cult of Trump, it wouldn't matter what Trump did. They would support him. But it isn't. He came in and commandeered the Tea Party, which means they already had a political, ideological, philosophical view of the world. And Trump came into that. They didn't come into him. He came in to take the helm of that as their leader, which means if he don't go along with what they want, they'll reject him, because they were there before him. He took advantage of the Tea Party existing. So that's why when he goes in a way that they don't like, they'll push back. The Democrats, they're inured to the party. I'm a member of this group, and it has become, it's purely moral. We are more moral than everybody. Why? We are for diversity. Why? Because that's morality. We're standing up against Putin. Why? Because he's evil and we're good. That's about morality. It's about good versus evil. If you listen to the rhetoric of the Democrats, it's always one thing: heroes and villains. Trump is a villain. Biden's a hero. Putin's a villain. Whoever Biden's a hero. Assad's a villain. This person's a villain. He's an evil dictator. Blah blah blah. It sounds like something like Lex Luthor or Doc Ock with Spider-Man. There's always this terrible villain on the other side that we as heroes are standing up against. And I'm part of the team, the Justice League, standing up against the villain. Yep. It's a twisted view, Manichaean view of the world of pure good versus pure evil. So I'm on the side of pure good. So we must always use the rhetoric to paint people that disagree with us as pure evil. That's why they will literally hate you. If they say something and you question, well, I don't know about a trans woman with sports, we need to talk about that. You want to have an intellectual discussion. You may agree with it or you may not agree with it, but you want to have an intellectual discussion, maybe even a scientific discussion. Well, let's look at what doctors say. Is there really a physical data? Give me some empirical data from the medical field. Is there a testosterone level? I want empirical data. And then let's look and see, what the doctors say. Is there a physical advantage? That's a part of it. And then we can have cultural. But I want an intellectual, physical discussion about whether or not trans women should be competing with whatever you call them, people who are born women, biologically born women. Okay. We'd be like, yeah, sure. We can talk about anything. you're evil if you even try to have this discussion, because this is a moral situation about good and evil. And if you don't agree with me, I don't care about your damn empirical data. You are immoral and I'm immoral. That's why you can't deal with them. Every single thing is about morality, and they're the good people. And if you try to even question something that they have pegged as one of their foundational beliefs, you are evil and immoral, and you shouldn't even be talked to.
Man, they really did a number on us, Garland. They really did. I mean, on one hand, I'm like, I mean, we're proud when we get out of that system, when we get out of that mind control of the mainstream propaganda. It does feel refreshing. And I know, people that have that experience, we've all had that moment, that aha realization moment. It happens at different times for all of us. It feels good, but sometimes every once in a while, like right now, as you're bringing up the Tea Party, and I'm remembering it, I'm having some flashbacks and some kind of PTSD from when those mind control machine was on my head, and I was falling for this. And you spell it out perfectly regarding the way we look at the way they train us to look at the world is elementary as you can get. It's good, evil. It's good guy, bad guy, and it's also about killing the messenger of anyone that has something to say. I look back at stuff in that time period, and you watch footage of stuff you saw at the time that you thought one way. You go, wait a minute, I'm looking at it differently now. For example, did you remember the one with Tom Cruise on the couch with or talking with Matt? What's his name? What was the guy? The guy fired from
Matt Lauer.
Matt Lauer. It was when we watched it. It was in 2012, talking about big pharma. And at the time, you're watching Matt Lauer and Tom Cruise, and you're like, well, Tom Cruise is the one that's out of his mind. Matt Lauer is trying to have a decent conversation. You could watch that footage now, and you're like, wow. It's so interesting. It's so interesting to have that new perspective now. And again, it's not about what to say Tom Cruise is right about. That doesn't take away when he's wrong about other stuff. We know the stuff he's been wrong about, Scientology, all this stuff there. But we understand that when somebody makes a point, you don't take apart the person. You don't put the person up on trial. You take the thing they say and say, does this thing have merit? And what he was saying about childhood prescription drugs that were insane, the Adderall, the Ritalin, all of this stuff. He's saying this is insane. And who are you, Matt Lauer, to sit on here with all the influence you have and not know what the hell you're peddling? You are pushing this stuff and you know nothing about it. And Matt's like, I'm not doing that. He's like, yes, you are. And you are irresponsible for doing that. And like, there's your point right there. And he was right. And yet we were conditioned to go, no, don't listen to what Tom Cruise has to say. He's crazy. And so we're not going to fall for that anymore. We're not going to fall for, don't listen to what RFK Jr. has to say. He's crazy. No, he has a point to make. We want to see the data, that we want to see the vaccine data. We want to see this. So let's look into it. And that's what we're hoping for right now, at least some incremental steps in the right direction. But yeah, this is exactly what we need to be thinking of. And I like going back and reliving some of this, even though it hurts to do sometimes. I'm glad we get to do it and have a new perspective, for sure.
Yeah, and remember what were the people that were camped out in the afterwards, because they were the more young kind of hippie types. They were camped out at a place in New York, and
you talked about the Occupy.
And what happened with Occupy, and I'm a firm believer that what happened with Occupy was they kind of agent provocateurs and things like that tore them to pieces, because they started off and they were up Occupy Wall Street. What were they? They were pissed. What were they pissed about? The same thing as the Tea Party. Yes, they were angry about the bailouts.
Yes.
Right? But that was the left-wing version. But they got taken out. How? They got them to go full anarchy. Right? So what happened? Anything that happened at their little camps, they had to have 100%. They had to have a vote. And everybody had to agree or nothing. They couldn't do it. So they couldn't do anything. Because here's the thing about it, and I believe it's agent provocateurs. If I can put one agent or two or three people in there, that's my intelligence people, right? FBI, CIA, whatever. And then I get you to say, we can't do anything unless we have 100% agreement. Well, one of them is always going to disagree. So you ain't going to do nothing because I got a couple of FBI and CIA agents in there. And no matter what you want to do, one of them is always going to say no. Then I knew people that went to him and talked to him and said, you know, you guys, you need to try to do something. You need to organize. What is it that you want? What are you asking for? What direction do you want? Get away from us. We just want to yell. And then we're going to run out the door and slam the door behind us. And that'll be it. That'll show you. You know what I mean? So it became like after Trump. Remember when Trump got elected and they had these big so-called women's marches and they had the pink hats and all that stuff on? Yeah, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz was speaking and stuff like that. And but they never asked for anything. So what happens on the left is they get you to just scream into the wind. They get you to come together and say, I'm protesting what? Trump or something. What is it that you want? Huh? I never thought about that. And then you just eventually go home and you never wanted anything. You never asked for it. You know, where the Tea Party, they kind of were pissed. They didn't, I don't know if they were sure what they wanted, but they wanted something. And they stayed together and they grew into a movement. And now Trump's is working for the Tea Party. And they changed their name, sure, whatever. He came up with a good slogan for them that sounded great, made them feel good, and went forward with it. That's why Trump has difficulty with the Tea Party, because sometimes he gets too far over his skis and they yank him back. He gets too far over his skis. Every now and then, Trump will say something and the Tea Party people will be like, hey, screw that. We ain't down with that. But you notice when they do that, Trump will, he ain't an idiot. He has a good feel for the audience, shall we say. And usually when he does that, he pulls back just a little bit. You know what I mean? He won't run headlong into him, because it's like an entertainer, like a stand-up. He's watching his audience. He's dealing with them. He gets a feel. A DJ gets a feel. You don't go too back against the audience. You flow with them. Trump understands that. That's why, I mean, Trump's a politician. Trump's an actor. You know, if they think he's the answer, they're mistaken. He ain't. But I'm just saying. Let me say this about Trump. The only one good thing I'll say about Trump, I don't think he wants to get us nuked. I'll at least, let's start there. Okay. I'm not saying I love Trump. I support him. I'm a lefty and everything, but I kind of had a feeling we were about to get nuked with the Democrats. And now I think we may have at least a 4-year respite. We may get nuked after that, but I think we got 4 years where we probably won't.
I mean, there's still
no guarantees.
There's still those in the circle that might want us to get nuked. I mean, you always got your John Boltons and your Mike Pompeo people. We've seen them, those types. And, obviously the Biden administration is loaded with people, the Blinkens and the Newlands. They just want total nuclear annihilation. But you might be right. Trump might be, at least that's the one thing. We might still be alive in another 3.5 years from now, Garland. I'll give a little shout out to the Bernie movement, the ones of us that knew when to walk away. We had a little something similar going that you described about the Tea Party. I think that we were able to say, Bernie, wait a minute. Why aren't you doing the thing that you said you do? Bernie just didn't do what Trump did. Bernie decided to say F you to us and say, we don't need you. And that's why the movement ended. But Bernie could have done what Trump did. He could have been like, okay, I hear you. Let me back off a little on this. But I want to give at least some of us credit that we came from a place that we weren't exactly. I mean, some people were hero worshiping, just like obviously some people hero worship Trump for sure. But there's enough people that were like about the idea, and he just happened to be the person in the lead, the leader of that thing at that moment. And I think that that's what we tried to do with Bernie. We tried to hold him accountable, but instead of him taking that second, doing the game show host thing and going, hold on, let me read the room, he didn't. He was like, F you, I don't need you. And then here we are. But but I think the people, there's credit to be given on both sides sometimes when they say, wait, we don't just want to show up hundreds of thousands of people in the street. We actually want to get something from this. We want to do something. But it's not all the time. And a lot of times people just go home after, and it sucks. I think we just need to get better. The people need to get better at organizing. Do you think the organizing of the Palestinian protests, has that been something that is a little more clear as far as objective? Because I think I'm leaning towards that. That's a little more clear over the last 16 months or so, right?
I think it was. And you know what? What I like about that is ultimately all these people that just said, screw you, I'm not voting for the Democrats. And they were like, but Trump. And they said, that ain't my problem.
Yeah.
You had one chance and you committed a genocide. And we said, will you stop? And you said no. So we're out. And the Democrats didn't think they'd ever get that. They thought they could do anything ever. And in the end, all they had to say was but Trump and get all of those voters back. And they gambled wrong. It was a good lesson for them, which they won't learn. Bernie, let me say this about Bernie. You know, we projected on, but he said all the right things, and he always has. This is nothing new. He's always said all the right things. But we projected something onto Bernie that he wasn't really, if you look into Bernie's history. And I didn't then, but I mean, you know, NAFTA. Early 90s. What did he say? He predicted everything that would happen with NAFTA. He said how terrible it was. It was horrible. It would do this, everything. He was completely right. Okay. And then 3 years or 2 years later, when Clinton was running in 96, Bernie ran out and said, we got to vote for Clinton. We got to support the Democrats no matter what. So what Bernie does is in the off time, when there's nobody running, he screams how bad the Democrats are. He tells you how bad they are. He tells you everything they're doing wrong perfectly. And then as soon as it's voting time, he says, but we got to vote for them because they're better than any other party. That's kind of his job. And we were expecting something different, but that's never what he was. He did what he had always done. He's like, I think he's the worst. Now, there were some good things about that because the problem the Democrats had was they made people believe that they had a chance of getting like Medicare all for all and stuff like that with Bernie. They had to do that. And they did that. And when people found out they'd never get it from that party, a lot of people left. So it screwed them. So there was a very good thing from Bernie in bringing up to people, you have a right to ask for it. Once Paul Robeson used to say, never ask for anything you have a right to demand, right? And I knew his son used to say that. My dad always said, never ask for anything you have a right to demand. And that's a great quote.
Yeah.
And that's what people started doing. They're like, we're sick of asking, we're demanding it. And then when they found out they couldn't get it from that party, they're like, what am I even here for? I'm out. So now Bernie served a good purpose for us in that he opened a lot of our eyes as to who the Democrats Party was. He taught us that we had a right to demand things. And then, of course, he double crossed us like we always did, stabbed us in the back, and off he went. And now we're like, oh, for God's sake, Bernie, you're humiliated. Now you just look at him in pity. We must stand against the dictator Putin. We're like, oh, for God's sake. Oh, we must not have a ceasefire because Hamas. Well, yeah, we know. Yeah, John Bolton, Bernie, get the hell out of here. We know who he is. But, you know, we can dismiss him and say it's pathetic. It's sick. I feel sorry for that bastard. But we're way past that.
Yeah. No, he's shown his true colors. And you're right. Just look at his history. And I wonder, God, what world would we live in an alternate dimension where Bernie fought harder and won? And then we would have President Sanders. And here he is doing all the neocon stuff that he's been pushing now, and we'd be like, oh God, like that's what I'm looking at. That's the silver lining for losing out on the Bernie movement, which I guess was never really real in the first place. We would have neocon policies right now, and he'd never get to Medicare for all. By the way, he would never actually get to it. He couldn't. So it would just
he never ran to win.
Yeah,
isn't it apparent he never really ran to win?
Yeah,
he just ran to say what he had to say. And in fact, Bernie didn't want to run. And then some lefties went to him and said, Bernie, we need you to run. And just so you can talk about Medicare for all. So he says, okay, I'll run. This is a true story. I know the people that talked to him. And they said they expected him to get about 6%. And he ran against Hillary, who was an absolute disaster. And he blew up. And that was the plan was for him to run, to talk about Medicare all for all, to keep the issue of Medicare for all out there and to get about 6%. That was the plan. So he never really ran. We didn't know. He didn't run to win. I don't think Bernie wanted to win.
Yeah, no, he didn't. And he was a shadow of himself the second time around for sure. I mean, just the fact that this Joe Biden is my friend garbage.
And he still would have won.
Yeah.
He still would have won. He would have won. Except look what they had to do. If Super Tuesday, they had to throw everybody out and rearrange because they had old, dead man Joe running against him. He still would have won.
He was up. He was first place in January of 2020, right before the lockdown. He was number one, and he was going out on camera saying, the reason I'm number one is because of Putin. Putin wants me to win. So he was just invalidating his entire campaign. You're right. He could have won. But hey, we're smarter from it.
Yes.
And, we're
I'm glad it all
stronger,
happened.
smarter.
I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't know what I know if that hadn't been for the Bernie. If it hadn't been for him running, and then getting screwed, and then standing up for the people that screwed him. I needed all of those things to make me the person I am today, to learn the lessons. Bernie had to run. Bernie had to say the things he had to say. He had to get screwed, and then he had to double cross us. All of that needed to happen, or we wouldn't be, you and I, neither one of us would know the things that we needed. So we can thank Bernie.
Absolutely.
Even for double crossing us. That was a lesson we needed to learn.